Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Prometheus. It sounded like a good idea, but now you kind of regret it. Let's start the show.
Welcome everybody to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Pupper's Beer, the lager that rests in your lap but doesn't lap your face. Pop in for a Puppers. Welcome everybody to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And we are filmmakers who like to analyze films in the worst way possible, where we virtually get everything wrong. Like, I don't know, I mean, that could be true actually, because we don't really, maybe to the chagrin of the casual listener, we don't really go and like do heavy research and figure out what is the filmmaker trying to do according to them? What do the critics say? And what's the popular opinion? We don't really know any of that stuff. Instead, we're more interested in what is the movie presenting to us and what can we take away from just watching the movie. Because I think that's a much more honest look, because someone might intend for a thing to say a thing. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what it's saying. And so I think if you strip something down, especially when it comes to art, and move away from assigned intention and instead look at the product of it and its impact, to me that's a much more interesting avenue to look at when it comes to whatever assessing art and meaning and whatever. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that there are some really wonderful aspects that critics bring to film. I mean, I think that they're a big motivator, and I think that it does matter eventually probably what other people think of a film, right? But when you're first discovering a movie or a piece of art in general, having it be as untainted as possible and have your reaction being as untainted as possible is kind of the goal, right? And then after you have that initial feeling, then getting all of the other bits and pieces from society, from critics and stuff, and are they will affect you probably, but they won't affect you in a way that will take away from your first viewing experience, which is what the filmmaker intended in the first place. And as with any kind of art, the filmmaker might be trying to say one thing, but end up to you saying something totally different than to me. And so hearing all of the chatter from everyone and everything might change that. So we try to work as much in a vacuum as we can, at least initially, and I like that.
Yeah, and I really love what you said about the ability to just watch a thing before consuming any kind of other outside opinions, because it is nice to say I know exactly how I feel about this thing because I did, like you said, consume it in a vacuum. And that's a really beautiful way to just approach something in an honest and unambiguous way. It's just to say, well, how do I feel about it, instead of creating these expectations going into something can be kind of difficult, depending on the medium, I guess. Maybe certain things are worse the wear for it. Like, I think, and in ways that you might not anticipate, like going into, if someone just drops a new stand-up comedy special and you go into it blind, I think that's going to be a better experience than if someone starts telling you the jokes beforehand, right? It's like, oh, and he has this bit, about dragons and whatever. And you're just like, oh, okay. Or there's this really, and we can leave it at this, I guess, but there's this great moment from Jerry Seinfeld where he talks about doing a stand-up at, I don't know, as a charity or maybe just a regular show. And the way he gets introduced is, this is the funniest man in America. You're about to have the best time of your life. And he's like, I can't live up to that. Like, you set the bar way too high. And now, how do I live up to that? And so I think there's something to letting something come to you organically instead of like false expectations or tainted. If someone says, oh, this is a terrible movie, you might now see it as a terrible movie because now you're looking for why it's terrible instead of, having that fresh experience. I don't know. So,
right. Yeah. Well, with that, we are covering A Quiet Place 2 today. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's out today, I believe. If you haven't seen it, please pause this episode, go watch it, and watch part 1 as well, because it's a direct continuation of that. And we're gonna spoil, both films in this episode.
For Sherzies, we'll talk about a few things. We'll touch very lightly on cinematography and some of the ways they framed horror for a PG-13 movie. We'll also look at a lot of the story and writing, some of the differences between part 1 and 2, things that worked really well in one, and maybe not quite as well in the other. We'll also discuss why sequels are really hard. They're very hard to do, especially, if one is much better than the other, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. Following the events at home, the Abbott family now face the terrors of the outside world. Forced to venture into the unknown, they realize the creatures that hunt by sound are not the only threats lurking beyond the sand path. Written and directed by John Krasinski. Cinematography by Polly Morgan. Starring Emily Blunt as Evelyn Abbott. John Krasinski as Lee Abbott. Millicent Simmonds as Regan Abbott. Noah Jupe as Marcus Abbott. Cillian Murphy as Emmett. And Djimon Hounsou as Man on Island.
Nailed it.
Ronnie, what do we got? We got units headed out there now. EMS and fire. Whereabouts? I think up by Walker's farm.
What is going on? It's okay, baby. It's okay. Mom? Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. We're okay. We're okay. That's Dad. Okay. That's Dad. Dad. Where? Mom. Oh my God.
So, I think you were the most excited person I know about the sequel. Like, this was appointment setting for us. Like, we bought our tickets weeks in advance, and we're dang near literally counting down the days. We did everything except have a part 2 calendar and marked off the days. And I'm just curious, like, how did it hit you, especially the day after? Like, we're, a good 12 hours after the fact. And so I'm curious, how's it sitting with you?
I mean, to be honest, I was underwhelmed. The beginning was really great. I love how they went, they started pre the first part, pre the first movie, and led into that movie. So I really like that. I always like seeing John Krasinski on the screen. But after that, after basically the continuation of that scene, it was just very slow moving, which is okay. I'm not. The way that I'll phrase my experience with this would be, it might be a great middle movie, right? It might be a really good second part to a trilogy, but even then, I feel like everything that they did in the film, and I think we talked about this after as well, standing outside, I feel like everything they did in the film could have been done in the first half of the film.
Yeah. And
then introduce some kind of, we knew what the goal was pretty early on, not right at the beginning, but about a quarter of the way in, I think, maybe a third of the way in, we realized, oh, okay, Regan is going to try to go to this island and put the sound from her hearing device through radio, right? And to help the world, right? To rid these creatures, to hurt these creatures.
Right.
Okay, that sounds great, but we know it so early that it just feels like, okay, they need to be able to do that and that not work, right? Because we knew it so early, rather than not knowing what the solution was gonna be until the very end. Like thinking the solution is one thing, and then that doesn't work, and then they find the real solution right at the end that you don't expect. But we're expecting it the whole time, and so, or not the whole time, but a lot of the time we're expecting it. When she says, "Oh, I found," and yeah, there's a couple other holes too. So like, she's able to track the where the tower is. I guess where the signal is coming from the radio.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really know how. I mean, I guess she's tracking stuff on a map when she's sitting on top of the silo. She's tracking the fires, that come out. So we see her tracking. There's a little bit of a preemptive kind of thing. Okay, she's like, doing research, discovering stuff, trying to get knowledge of for whatever purpose. But then to just to also be able to track where a radio station is, I didn't really know how she could do that. I wasn't really informed that she is very knowledgeable about this. Maybe I needed to watch the first one again right before this. But did you watch it or
no?
Yeah.
I didn't. But
that
should not be a requirement to understanding what's happening in the story,
right? Like maybe it should be like, okay, just a little bit of a reminder that she's really good with this kind of thing, right? Even if it was said in the first one or not, it doesn't matter. Just give us a reminder that she's good at technical stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like she's sitting on top of a silo and can see the radio tower. And so she's like marking it on the map. She can't see that. She can just see the fires, and that's what she's marking on the map. But now she's finding a radio tower. Anyway, so that aside, and we're just talking about, plot points and things right now. Mm-hmm. I liked that it was centered around her and she was the savior in the dad portion. Kind of like the continuation of her father. I like that a lot because the first one was all about her relationship with him. And so I like that they gave her that. I like that there is another father figure, but as I had mentioned to you, I just don't feel like he was built into either enough of a father figure or enough of not a father figure in order to play the role that, I don't think he was trying to fill the role of Lee in this. He even says, "I'm not Lee, you are." And that's a very powerful line in the film when they're on the island. Very powerful. But I didn't have quite enough either backstory or exposition with Cillian's character enough to really be invested in his survival and his journey with her, right? Like, yeah. So there was some weakness there, I think, too. And then the ending was, it just cut to black with her standing over, the dead creature. And it was just lacking. It just felt lacking, man. Okay. So the thing that they had planned to do for 2/3 of the entire movie, maybe 3/4, they did. Okay. Yeah, but now what? I did like the things I did like were, I like how they showed Evelyn and Marcus and the baby at the same time that they showed Regan trying to defeat the monster. Yeah. To basically save everybody, right? I felt like, very verklempt when they were trapped in there in the metal sphere and all that stuff. So I did like that, and I just love being in this world. I really, really do. But also I didn't feel like it was as quiet as the first movie. Interesting. I'm going to go back and watch it again, but the first movie was just so jarring because it was just, most of it was nothing, at least no audio, and it was just painful, painfully quiet. Maybe because it was the first one, but I kind of expected the same for the second one, but they're just, being in Cillian's bunker where they could talk more freely was like, okay, this feels safer. Even though we find out it technically isn't necessarily, it still felt safer. We felt safe as viewers, right? And the point is for us not to feel safe, even when they might be. And so yeah, I walked away. I mean, I enjoyed every minute of it. I thought it was still a strong film. And I'm gonna go see it again because I really want to, because the reviews are stellar, and everybody is saying that this is really good. But I just felt there was a magic to the first one that this one didn't have, that it could have. It could have had it, you know.
Yeah.
Also the baby. Man, I love John Krasinski as an actor. I love him as a director and as a filmmaker. I think he's really, really good. But man, the baby felt like a weight. You know, not like a beautiful, precious thing. I mean, there were some really good moments, you know, of like Marcus holding him and you know, kissing the baby and you know, trying to take care of him and you know, oh my God, when they're crying and he's locked in he's locked in the shell. What do we call it? We'll call it the shell.
Yeah.
And he's locked in the shell, and I thought that was a really good touch that they don't tell us why the watch alarm goes off. They show us, like, you got to open the door because you can't breathe in there because it's airtight. They show us many times. That was really great exposition without saying anything. So then when it's a life or death situation, it really weighs on us. But I just kind of, man, there were a lot of things that just didn't quite hit for me in it, and those are just a few. But I think the more I watch it, I'm either going to see things that I didn't before, or I'm going to, in a good way or in a bad way, you know?
Yeah.
Also, I felt like, and I'll stop here, we saw a lot of the monsters. Yeah, we saw a lot of the monsters. And part of the amazing thing about the first one was that we barely saw any of them until the end, really, right? And when we did see them, we saw pieces of them, not like full on, you know, very much. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the opposite. I would prefer more monster because at a certain point, once you've already shown us the monster, or the first film was all about, you know, what is this thing and how does it operate? And once you've kind of revealed those cards, I think the only thing you can do now is just throw more of them at us because that same level of tension is evaporated. Like, you can't regenerate the mystery around this thing that we already understand. And so I
could hear that. I can see that.
They didn't do enough of one or the other. Yeah. So,
I guess I was looking at it from the point of view of trying to match the magic of the first one.
Yeah.
And I guess, yeah, you're right. In the second one, you can't really necessarily do the same thing. So, you know, the only time we really see an army of them is at the boat dock, right? Where they just destroy everyone. Yeah. There's like 4 or 5 of them or something. But yeah, if one can do so much damage, what could like 50 of them, right? And if the whole world is like this, there's got to be thousands of them out there. So interesting.
100%. So before I dive into my shenanigans, I am curious, like, what about how'd you feel about the opening? Because it had such a strong, like, first 10, 15 minutes, this cold open before they, you know, show the title, which is a great use of a cold open. I'm just curious, like, what are the elements about that you liked, and or, you know, the expectations that it might have set for you for the rest of the film that didn't quite meet?
I liked seeing that they came from a meteor or a comet that hits the Earth, I guess, or must have been multiple, because
all over the world,
you know, all over the world, because you see one like flying, like it's going to land, you know, tens of thousands of miles away, but then, you know, a few minutes later, the aliens are there in their town. So obviously something had happened before. So anyway, I liked seeing that. I liked seeing, you know, like some pretty, like the confusion of everyone. I liked seeing Lee there again. I liked Lee saving his family, or at least Regan, you know. I liked seeing Lee like understand immediately we have to be quiet, you know, and shushing the guy, putting his hand over the guy's mouth when they're hiding in the pub. I liked the introduction of Cillian's character. The thing, you know, that you alluded to of like, you know, some things that might have fallen flat were like, okay, well, I see him one time or for like a couple of minutes, but I don't get a whole lot of information about who he is. I just see, okay, that's Cillian Murphy. We're definitely going to see him again.
Yeah.
But I had seen the trailer, so I knew he was a major part of it. But we don't get a whole lot from his character yet, which is okay, I guess, because we're still, you know, like so happy that Lee is back and we see him and you know, wanting to live in this moment for a long time because we know that we're about to cut to after he's dead. So yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. The whole scene in the car that you played where she backs up and then we see the arm come out of the bus in front of her. So good. Really, really, really good. Yeah. And then the title sequence, it was fantastic. I loved it. I would have liked to have had more of it, you know, to like maybe get to their house somehow. Like, how do they get out of the city square to their home? You know, what are the first, because the first one opens, it's already been this way for however long, maybe 6 months or 3 months or something. So what were those first 3 months like, or those first few months like? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that opening sequence was just so fantastic, and I was on the edge for sure. I love that, like you just said, like they reestablished the dad, and it refreshes the tragedy of losing him, especially as we were kind of seeing him save people. Like you said, he puts his mouth over his hand over their mouth in order to keep them quiet. He's catching on very quickly about how these things are operating, and I'm totally fine with that. Like, it played very well, unexpectedly well for how well kind of everyone caught on, and I think there's some, you know, semblance of truth to that. You know, I think it's probably something that's in our reptile brain, you know, that's deep in our evolutionary history of our ability to find patterns, pattern recognition. And usually that's more of a visual thing, but escaping a predator, I think, is kind of embedded. And so I'm totally fine with how quickly everyone caught on and started playing, and especially reaffirming the kind of person he is, because part of me kind of expected him, and honestly, this is exactly what I expected, for him to just look over at this person praying and start scooting the other direction, because he's like, I know what happens next. And instead, you know, he quiets them. He's trying to save as many people as he can. And that's just a beautiful way to reintroduce this character and to kind of open up that wound all over again because of, you know, just the kind of person he is. And it's a great way to reestablish the rules in the universe and gets us emotionally engaged with all of it, along with the family themselves. And the loss of that little boy. Like, we don't spend a ton of time on the little boy, smartly, because he's not around anymore, but it reminds us that, oh yeah, this family is still in the aftermath of a tragedy. Yeah. And so that opening sequence was great, but I think I have a lot of the same response, like, underwhelmed. I was hoping for more, especially on the emotional side. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll just scrub through my notes, because I literally sat in the parking lot for half an hour just hashing out all the things that I was feeling and thinking throughout the film. And I think the biggest one, and I'm going to use a phrase that I don't think I've ever used on the show before, because I don't really believe in this terminology, which, if you're a writer or a filmmaker out there, or, you know, a literature professor, you know, don't roll your eyes at me, or do. And, you know, but I get it. I'm the dumb one in this conversation. I totally get it. But I don't believe in the 3-act structure as a method of creating your stories. Not because I don't think it's useful. I think it's useful in kind of a hindsight way. Like, you wrote your story and here's a way to analyze it and figure out what's working or what's not. But I'm just not really big on discussing or even thinking about stories in terms of a 3-act structure. That said, I think this movie had a really big problem with the second act. Like, there's a massive lull in the second act that just kind of puts you to sleep. And it's because of a really bad thing that I think is happening in this film, which is the characters are kind of dumb. It's a complete reversal of what we experienced in the first film. Because in this film, everyone's kind of proactive, right? Everyone has a thing that they're trying to do. Well, two people have a thing that they're trying to do. The daughter and the mother both have something that they're trying to do. But it's kind of murky and it's not intensely logical. Like you were pointing out, the whole thing with the island is very murky and ambiguous. Like why I never really got a strong sense of why she's so intent on finding the island. Like to what end? And we kind of discover, oh, she's really after the satellite or the signal, the antenna. We can pump out this feedback signal to cripple the monsters. Cool. But the problem is that's not a good enough revelation to have a good payoff. I think instead you want to front load that expectation a lot heavier than they did. Maybe it was there and it just didn't grab hold of me very well. But I think if you front load it a lot harder, now we have an expectation and now we have a rooting interest for, yes, we need to get to this island and everyone needs to get on board with this plan. Instead, it's a little too murky. It's a little too ambiguous. Whereas clarity here provides a stronger sense of purpose and goal for us to root for. And it creates an external stake. Like there's something that we really have a vested interest in happening because we hate the monsters. Like there's no redeeming quality to these things. They're just killing machines. And that's good. That's a great monster. I'm all for that. And then going back to murky, proactive, goals, agendas. Why does the mom need to leave? Like, I get that she's getting medicine, but it's kind of boring. It's fine, but it's a very dull, goal. Because she's fighting for her family in a very uninteresting way, right? The son is hurt, but he's not exactly in critical condition on the edge of death. Like he doesn't need a brain operation. Instead, it's a ticking time bomb that may as well be counting down starting from 8 months. 1 second by 1 second, 8 months is coming. Okay, I know it's eventually going to detonate, but possibility of tetanus or pain is not a very compelling, stake, emotional investment for the audience to have. It's just kind of oh, this is a chore that needs to get done. And that's fine if it happens either one, a little bit faster, or the journey is a little bit more arduous. And neither of those things are true. And so it's just, it's not a very compelling goal or mission. And then three, the son, and this is what really got me. The son leaving the baby to kind of go peep around, stupid. That's a dumb
I was like, what
thing.
Is happening?
Why are you doing this? And here's the thing. I think the counter argument is that's what kids do. Yeah, that's what kids do, but it doesn't help us sympathize with them. Instead of buying in, we're kind of judging him as there's no good reason for his decision. And it doesn't reflect what the audience would do in his place. And so I think if you're going to have kids do something dumb that kids do, you need to have a much more immediate consequence instead of something that plays out over the course of 30, 40 minutes.
And he's not dumb.
He's a smart kid.
He's a smart kid who is looking out for his family as much as a kid his age can do. Yeah. And so it's very, just seems out of character for him to do that. Yeah,
totally. Whereas if it was someone that we didn't like, watching him do something stupid, that makes more sense. You want characters that you don't like doing something stupid in order to frustrate you and also to give your protagonist something to do. Now we got to save this jerk out of a moral principle instead of, this is someone that I love and of course I'm going to save them regardless. Whereas if you put someone that we hate in a bad position out of their own stupidity, now you're getting a moral quandary. Do we save this person that we don't like out of their own stupidity? Yes, because that's the right thing to do, right? There's all these impulses that you're feeding into the audience now, instead of someone that we like and that we think better of doing something stupid. That's not, a productive use of screen time, I think. Cillian, I don't even remember his name, Emmett. Like his name in the film is very glossed over. I'm sure it was in there, but it's so. All these characters shouldn't even have names, as far as I'm concerned. It should just be mom, dad, son, daughter. Man on Island is the most suitable name in here from Djimon Hounsou. And so, but Emmett feels very flat and unexplored. Exactly what you were saying. Like we just don't know enough about him and his real motivations. Like we kind of understand that he's detached, right? He's detached from society. He lost his family, and it makes sense. That's why. But I don't think there's enough emotional buttons there to really buy into him and his own vested goals, because he's still a good guy, which is great. And he's still going after the daughter and trying to help there and put the family back together because he's a good person. But I don't know. It feels very uncompelling emotionally because of the very reasons that you were saying, Todd. Like he's just a little flat and unexplored. Why does he want him to move on? Because he just wants to be bitter by himself. Okay, I guess. And he didn't help them out in the first film because why? Okay. And so it just feels very tangential, and we're just trying to button up expositional holes on why we know this guy and why he's still alive despite us never meeting him in the first film. It feels a little clunky in that way, as a way to tie up the universe.
You know what? Yeah, because just chime in real fast. I think part of the problem that I had with his character was that I didn't not like him ever.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, I didn't come save you because I'm an asshole. That's how I am. That's how you've known me to be ever since before this. You knew I wasn't going to come get you, right? Because I'm an asshole. Yeah. And then, and then you're just, I've lost everyone. You're kind of like my new found thing that I can save now. Maybe you win me over because you're awesome people, and then I help her, the girl, because I don't have a home to go back to, and he becomes better. Yeah. He becomes more like the dad throughout the film. Like that didn't happen. He was always just this guy, this random guy. So we didn't
just helping out, just pitching in.
I would have liked to have hated him.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have, yeah, exactly. I would have liked to have hated him at first so that he was redeemed. This was like a redeeming thing for him. Yeah. And then he dies at the end, right? Like
or
sacrifices himself.
I'm okay with not repeating that beat, but make it worthy. Sure. Make it worthy of that moment.
Right. I was just thinking extremes here. Yeah. Complete asshole to sacrificing himself for this little girl, right? Anyway, but we didn't.
That
really
would have been great. So. No, yeah, I think you're right. That would have been a really great journey, because in the first film, we see the dad sacrifice himself out of love and as a method of proving his love. And that was great. That was an emotionally compelling, and I'm getting, I still haven't even gotten to that stuff. Yeah. And so instead of clear motivations with any of the characters, we're kind of left just watching these characters move through the world. Because that's a problem, just because you want stronger characters with bigger opinions and bigger conflicts. And none of that is really just in here, because she gets him to buy in a little too easily, and they get to the island, they buy in a little too easily. Like it's all just very milquetoast. It's very, lacking in strong internal conflict between the characters themselves. Not even, getting into the world conflict. Just the interpersonal drama is very light, if there at all. And so it's not a bad idea if what we discover is compelling, right? If you want to have a slow, compelling thing, that's fine. Like if we get to the island to discover that, they've figured out a way to, I don't know, or that the island is being controlled by a master monster that's controlling all these other, things. That's a good thing to reveal at the last minute. But there was just nothing really compelling about it, right? The emotional stakes are absent, and we're just left with people trying to survive. And then at the end, when we ended part one, the mom, we left off with her being like a badass, ready to take over the world. And in this film, she suddenly became somewhat complacent and fearful. And she could have been driving the story all along, alongside her daughter. That's a really strong 1-2 punch, because her daughter had a pretty strong personality in the first film. And she still had a strong, perspective in this one. She just didn't have a lot to push against. There wasn't enough going up against her other than the monsters themselves. And instead of, putting the mom and daughter together to explore their emotional history, and maybe there's now a fallout between the mom and daughter about what happened to the father. Like, there's a really good stakes within the family to explore there that they just left completely on the table. Because instead of that, they tried to put the daughter with another dad figure, and the dynamics weren't driven by any real powerful commentary between the two. Instead, it was just a matter of, like you said, she becomes, the replacement in her family of the dad. And that's just not a very compelling argument either that they made, and maybe at all. Maybe there's a better version of it, that they just didn't tap into, but certainly was not it. And so I don't know. I think that kind of brings me to, the core problem that I think is here, which is a lot of the beats are very similar to the first film, only less exciting. Like, we don't really explore the world beyond what we've already seen, except with less emotional investment. We already know the monster's weakness and strength, and what the first film did really, really well, excellent, perfect. This one did not. And so the first film played in contrast perfectly, like using contrast. The use of contrast was perfectly executed, right? The monster's strength became its weakness. Its sensitive hearing became its pitfall. The daughter, thinking that her dad's push for her hearing aid was his judgment against her, and how their brother, passed in the opening of the first film, and now became in the first film became the salvation of the family. It became a demonstration of his love. Like, that's a very powerful turn in the climax of the film. That's a great use of this object, this thing, as a source of conflict and a source of resolution. Like, what a beautiful way to contrast, all these elements in your story. And part one was a metaphor. God, the entire world was built around a family who could not communicate with each other, which was absolutely paralleled with the monster's ability to listen and wait for them to do so and kill them for the effort. Like, this family who has this emotional baggage that they can't deal with within each other is reflected and echoed in the world itself, waiting for them to try and do it so that they can kill them. Like, that's just beautiful. That's a beautiful metaphor. And then, of course, the resolution of the film perfectly overlapped the emotional journey of the daughter. Her journey of understanding, my dad, whatever, he doesn't hate me and blame me. Instead, he's trying to help me. And that thing became the solution for not just the external problem, but also the internal resolution of your main character. God, that's perfect symmetry and storytelling. And so part two, let's look at, with all that in mind, let's look at part two. There was no emotional journey. Like, there was the promise of one, and I think they could have tackled any number of avenues that we've already kind of hit on. But I thought the one that they were going for, which they just set up on a tee, was when Emmett set the table with, anyone who survived is not someone worth saving. Wow. That's a thesis right there. We have a thesis. And what they could have done, what I expected them to do, was to show us why he's right. And then at the end, prove why he's wrong. Like, that's everything you want. Instead, we do eventually run into a group of evil people. And we don't really, they're just kind of a normal evil. Like, there's nothing really great about their duplicity. And instead, Emmett uses the monsters to kill them, which was great. That's a fun new wrinkle in this universe. One that I was completely anticipating, for sure. But I wanted to see that. My problem with it, on the other hand, is that you have these bad guys who set a trap and didn't know how to handle the the result of their trap. Like, why should they be, floored or, surprised by monsters coming out of the woodwork when noise is made through these bells? That should have been a part of their, like, when this happens, if this person, triggers this thing that we set up, we know how to deal with it. And instead it became their undoing. And that felt very underthought. It still worked because it's this carnage and we hate these people because they're trying to kill our friends. But I think there was more to squeeze out of that dynamic. And maybe it was a little underthought in the execution of it. And then we find an island filled with good people and find out, oh no, they're good people. Like, that's all there was to discover in this thing.
Yeah.
And then we watch them die, which, is boring. There's no other real way to say it. It's very boring. And we intercut that whole sequence of them being slaughtered with the sequence of the mom trying to save the son from his own stupidity, which is frustrating since I was emotionally unengaged because I'm still kind of judging his dumb decision. And I'm like, we shouldn't even be here in the first place. And then why is this happening? Like, I think I was expecting so much more from the story that whole setup was underwhelming. And I just found it uncompelling. And I was happy, that they won. But the final resolving moments of that whole sequence just felt like unearned pauses where characters are dramatically pausing and waiting for no real reason other than to build a climax, because they're executing the exact same thing that we saw in the first film. Yeah, we know what happens whenever you slam the earpiece, the hearing aid, into the mic. We've already felt and experienced all this. And so this whole sequence is just a rehash and therefore unsurprising and unfulfilling. But even worse than that, and this is so much worse, is that there are no emotional stakes. What are they fighting for? To live. Cool. We've been doing that since the beginning. But it's boring because we expect characters to want to live, but what we want are characters who have a reason to live. And you could assign any number of emotional investment stakes for that, whether it's redemption, like in the first film, there's a certain level of redeeming the sacrifice that her father made, or you could have had vengeance, like this is something. There's this new bad guy that's evolved, maybe Djimon Hounsou, instead of being this good person, maybe he's a bad person, and now he's cost us something, whatever. He's killed a member of our family or whatever. He's endangering our family, whatever. Vengeance. Now there's a good reason to manipulate these monsters to killing our adversary. There's an emotional stake there, whatever it is. Love, like in the first film, maybe vindication to prove that I'm right and they're wrong. You could have made the vindication anything around the thesis that they already had, right? That people are worth saving. And here's, my vindicating moment to prove why they're worth saving is maybe someone is trying to sacrifice. Maybe Emmett is trying to sacrifice himself, which is proving him against his own thesis. That would have been beautiful. You have this character that says people aren't worth saving. True. And he himself becomes worth saving. That would have been gorgeous. And a vindicating moment for why he's wrong. Like, you could have picked that and probably 1,000 other reasons. These were just me spitballing over the course of 5 minutes. Like, imagine what they could have done with all the time, of exploring some of these ideas. And so I think the missed opportunity is to drive home their thesis statement on an emotional level, instead of proving Emmett wrong by simply showing up to an island with good people who are never tested with his thesis. Those people are never tested. And the closest that we get is the man that we meet, that he wants to go back and save his family. And what sucks is that it immediately gets him killed. We never really have a moment to see how that could or could not pan out. It's just, an immediate consequence that didn't really have any emotional weight behind it. And so I would have been okay with that idea if you could have found a way to wind it up a little stronger, one way or the other. And then at the climax, the kids save the adults. But that that feels cool, but it also feels random and not at all pointed. Like there's no real setup to that payoff. It just kind of happens without any meaningful overlap within the story. Like, why is that significant? And I don't, on a more, less thematic element here, I didn't really buy her ability to crush this thing's skull. She's not a physically intimidating character. I think it might have been a little wiser, instead of having, this teenage girl go against the physical prowess of a interplanetary, intergalactic monster, to give her some, a much stronger weapon just for, very, very surface level buy-in from the audience. I think that was a big risk on their part, and that had me withdraw from that element of the story. And so this gets into me doing the worst thing anyone should do, which is backseat driving, more than I've already done, believe it or not.
Are you going to rewrite the movie?
Not quite, but
okay. I saw it coming.
And I'm sorry, God, I hope John Krasinski
No,
isn't
you're not.
listening to
This is fun.
It's fun.
Why not?
But I think there's more interesting ideas they could have played with. And really, I think I'm not even going to nail everything down. I'm not going to do a full rewrite. I'm just going to go with the very simple suggestion of genre bending. Like, they didn't really flex the genre the way they should have. Because we have this silent survival horror in the first one, which is great. That's still one of the best horror films ever made. And this movie does not diminish that whatsoever. But you can't do a survival horror 2 times in a row and expect to have the same payoffs. Not whenever you're dealing with that good of a movie. Like, if this is just a blanket genre film, fine. Give me Friday the 13th 75 times and I'm going to go in. I know what I'm going to expect, and I'm going to walk out and be like, yeah, that was $10 and I enjoyed it. And what was that movie about? Like 5 seconds, the credits roll, and I'm like, what was that movie about? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But this isn't that. This is such a much more engaging thing. And so I think if they had engaged the film on a genre level differently, they could have done more. So the ways, I think you could have done that is we could have moved from this silent survival horror film into an action horror, a la Alien moving into Aliens. Like, okay, let's explore. Okay, we know what it means to have 1 or 2 of these things creeping around. What does it mean to have, like you said, 50? Why not? Like, at this point, maybe we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and instead of let's just kill these 1 or 2 again, instead let's put 50 of them against another group of people, and now we're not only going to use our new technology to punish the monsters, but we're going to use it to lure them into this big trap that punishes the other humans that are bad guys, and in a way destroy both of them in once. Like, you had an opportunity there to just put a more action heavy element, because the final scene, the final heartbeat of the part 1 pointed to action. When you have someone like pumping a shotgun and that's what you cut on, you very much are screaming action. And to not explore that element at all, I think is a massive misstep in the direction of this film. Or you could have, pushed this from a survival horror into interpersonal horror. How has the monsters affected their community on a personal level? They kind of hinted at it, but we didn't really explore it in any meaningful way, other than 4 or 5 minutes max. Like the way he's just kind of watching them enter his area hints at, okay, we're going to look at some of the interpersonal drama now, like on a social level. How is this impacting people? But it was very fleeting. Like, we set it up and then we just kind of walked away. Like, there was no hit. And in that way, ironically or coincidentally, I would point to something like a 28 Days Later, using zombies as a setup for social aspects of humanity. And I say coincidentally because of, Cillian Murphy is in 28 Days Later. Or, we could have went from a survival silent horror to an alien invasion horror. What else may be coming after the first wave? Are these pets? Are they like cleansing the earth of competition? Are they some kind of virus? Are they mutating the land? What's their bigger function? I think there's other space to explore the evolution of what these creatures indicate. Like, what are the implications of these creatures in and of themselves? You could have explored that a little bit more. What are those meteors that they're coming in on? I don't know. There's space to explore it. I'm not saying that's the best version of this. You could have went from survival to cultural horror. Like, what does society look like after living through this? Are there animals left alive? Like these things we saw in the first film, they killed like that raccoon, right? And the dogs, and like so maybe there's a fun analogy of how you could compare the monsters and how they treat us, and make an analogy to how humans treat our own animals. Maybe all the animals are gone now, and now we can't live off of killing cows anymore, for food. And what happens to society when all animals are gone and there's just a few of us left? I don't know. There's a commentary, and this is coming from someone, I eat lots of meat. Like, I'm not, I'm just saying I would be interested in having that perspective thrown at me. Like, this is an interesting conversation. And it's space to explore. I don't think you have to be pro or anti anything in order to explore the commentary that you can put around it. And so, whatever, etc. The point is that shifting the genre allows for new rules and devices to come into play. Because survival horror has its own elements of don't get caught, right? Action horror has its own elements of can we, brute force this thing out. And now, because of those very subtle like differences within genre, now you can test and push your characters in new, fresh ways that allows you to still explore the characters themselves and evolve the world and like push new buttons that create a whole new emotional roller coaster throughout the film. Anyway, as far as yeah,
love that.
Thanks, man. Like, there was so much space. Like, they could have also done what we were talking about earlier. Like, could have kept it in the same thing and just explored new emotional dynamics within the family. I think that could have served the perfect venue of, and I didn't really have any notes on this, but it is hard to write sequels because the problem is the things that people loved about the first one, you don't want to move too far away from in the sequel. Like, you want to audience liked a thing, let's give them more of that thing, which is dangerous because audiences don't actually want that same thing. They think they do. And this is where the job of the filmmaker comes in, is to tell them, here's elements that you liked from the first film, and here's ways that you don't think coming in that you wanted. Here's things you didn't expect to want that in fact you did want. It's very much a Steve Jobs of people don't really know what they want. They think they know what they want, but they don't know until you give it to them. And now it's like, yes, this is what I wanted all along. It's very much that side of things. And if you play that game, you might miss. You might say, yeah, let's bend the genre and make this into an action horror. And then people walk out and like, so disappointed. I wanted to have those moments of anticipation and because you missed. And it's not because, you as a filmmaker got it wrong. It's just because you just didn't execute it right. Or maybe there's elements to your story. I don't know. I'm all for taking chances. And I don't think this film took any. And I think that's my bigger issue is they didn't really risk much. And in doing so, I think they kind of lost. And that's not to say, I don't think this is a bad movie. It's a fine movie. Like, I enjoyed it. I wasn't disappointed, with the time spent. I was disappointed that they just really didn't take a crack at it, to really push the boundary and to refresh the world. I think that's my...
Yeah, I agree with 99% of that. I think that they did take risk, a lot of risk. I mean, they're risking, risking their lives in general, specifically, but like Regan, for example, didn't have to go look for that radio station. She didn't have to go by herself either. Cillian's character Emmett didn't have to go with her. I mean, like, they kind of did. I mean, Cillian didn't really have a whole lot to risk. I see what you're saying, because he didn't have his family anymore. You know, it would have been interesting if, like, he still had maybe his son or his wife, but she was dying and he needed to continue taking care of her, but he chose to go save Regan instead. You know, like, then there's a personal cost to it, going back to what you were saying about it, the internal struggle, right? In that regard. So yeah, definitely could have been more weight. I think that they risked what they were allowed to risk with the script, if that makes sense. The way the script is written is like, okay, well, you know, Regan's risking her life. Well, yeah, you know, they're all risking their lives all the time. Like you mentioned earlier, it's like what they've been doing this whole time. I mean, even to breathe is like risking your life. So, yeah, I agree. I agree with, like I said, 99% of that. I just feel like they did risk, but yeah, it felt like there was so much room in the script to do something interesting and unique. Yeah. That it was almost like oh man, really? You could have done so much more with this. I mean, yeah, it's hard though with a second movie like this, because the really stressful things about the first one, not all of them, but some of the really stressful things, one in particular, having a baby in silence, like, finding out you're pregnant, and then the like, oh my God, what are we going to do in 9 months? How are we supposed to have, you know, like what, and that is like a thing that's coming up, and you know it's coming, and like you have to prepare for it, and it could kill you, and you're not going to have that in this one, right? And so the baby, that's why I thought the baby was like more of a weight, because then what? Now you're just gassing the baby to keep him quiet the whole time.
Yeah, I think the problem though is all those things worked in the first one, not because it was well shot or because it was well acted, but because the audience was emotionally rooting for these characters to fix their problems. And if they die before they get a chance to do that, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
When you want something to emotionally get resolved, when you're like, apologize or tell her how you feel, and then a character is about to get killed before they ever have that moment, then you're just really torn up about it. Like, I don't want that stuff to happen. And in this film, there was no conflict. There was no conflict between the characters that gave you this emotional investment of, I need to see these people live so that they can, you know, fix their issues with each other. And so it doesn't matter how they played out any of the other stuff. I just didn't care because there was no conflict.
I mean, in the first one, their son dies.
Yeah.
Nobody dies in this movie.
Yeah.
There was no main character dies in this movie. You know? I mean, Djimon Hounsou's character died, but we know him all of 5 minutes. Like, he didn't even have a name in this film. Didn't even have a name. Like, kill off the only black guy. It's like the thing that you don't do these days.
While you were saying that, shout out to our man Aaron D. Alexander for stunt doubling for Djimon Hounsou. Like, that's freaking dope, bro.
Yeah, we saw your name in the credits and tried to take a picture. I couldn't get my phone out fast enough. I'm not quick enough on the draw. But yeah, it was awesome. And we saw your moment, and we think we saw your moment.
Yeah. It was pretty clear.
I didn't know if you were going to be mad at me or what, but as soon as it happened, I turned to you and I would like hit you on the shoulder like, that's Alexander. Yeah, anyway.
And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. It was such that was perfect. Yeah, and lightly, this is like all of 15 seconds worth of cinematography notes. I thought it was fantastic. They did a great job shooting this thing. They shot the hell out of it. Like really, really as good or better than the first one, I would say, actually. Like great reveals, great transitions. I I love the cop being butchered off screen, like whenever he's trying to save whoever, and he's calling attention to himself. Oh, he's shooting. He's trying to blast him with his shotgun, and absolutely failing, of course. But I love that transition, because we're I don't even know what to call it. We're dollying back, and as the monster reaches him, we boom down behind the cop car, the patrol car, to reveal the son who's hiding, on the other side. And so we see his reaction, and that's the kind of stuff you want to do for a PG-13 film, which is shoot it dark so that you can't really see the violence, like on the docks whenever the evil people get killed. That all happens in the dark, right? You can hide the violence and still get your PG-13 rating. You don't have to see limbs being severed and blood flying everywhere. You can mask it pretty well. And here we get to hear with the cop being killed in the opening, and yet another black man getting killed for the white man. What the hell, man? No, I'm just funny.
Yeah.
Being funny. But what's nice is we get to hear the kill. We get to see the car being rocked, and the reaction to the son listening to, his friend being killed, and trying to just keep it together, because he knows if he says anything, that's his life on the line next. I love the reveal of the son speeding around the corner to get snared in the bear trap. Like, that was a beautiful shot, and it had absolute maximum impact on both of us. Like, I saw you reel just like I did, because his foot gets caught in that bear trap, and there's just this very quick, like, ramp up to feeling what he's feeling in that moment, because it happens and you're like, what happened to him? What? Oh God, and they just shot it to maximum effect.
I will say, I'm glad you mentioned that moment. I will say that was probably the most powerful moment in the film for me, because of Emily Blunt's performance in that moment. I mean, obviously Noah was amazing in it. Like,
yes.
The agony, you could see it on his face.
Yeah.
He was hurt. But to be a parent watching a child be in such agony, and have to ask the child to be quiet, to beg, because it's going to kill all your family. Like, that is, I mean, obviously it's a very unique situation. I think that most of the time, like, my daughter cut her finger a month ago or something, and it was hysterics. I mean, it was like the end of the world, right? And but we were in our home, and I was able to just hold her and let her be as loud as she needed to be for as long as she needed to be. But in that scenario, like, to have that, I mean, obviously you need them to be quiet because, you don't want to die, but to have to ask your child, I know you're in agony, but stop. That's a really, really hard thing to do. Like, I can't imagine holding my daughter in my arms saying, please be quiet, when she's bleeding all over the place. Like, that's hard. That's rough. That whole, scene there was incredible. And then I always forget names. Regan, grabbing the, was it Regan who first did the speaker with and that moment, I guess, when Marcus is hurt and that first creature comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That whole scenario, that whole sequence, because we hadn't seen them use the speaker yet.
True.
We didn't, we knew what it was for, but we didn't see it.
I was going to ask you how you felt about that, because I don't really
didn't understand
how amps work. I was like, does that not need electricity?
It needs electricity.
Okay, so.
But I was thinking maybe she grabbed a battery.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't. She cut the power cord off the speaker.
Right.
She grabbed a microphone that she then plugged into the speaker that didn't have any power running to it.
And did that mic to you look like a phantom power mic or not?
There might. Well, it's one of those mics where you push down a button. It's like a talk talkback mic where you push down a button, and so it might be powered. And if it is powered, maybe there's an amplifier within the microphone itself that just sends the power into the speaker. I don't know.
Okay.
Usually the power doesn't come from the microphone. Usually it comes from the inner workings of the amplifier, which had its power cut. So I don't fully know.
Like for me, I was mostly fine with all that just because I don't know how that stuff works. But I was curious if that pulled you out at all. If you're like, that's not how that stuff works.
That was the first moment where I was like, I don't understand. Like that we're in the film. I was like, wait a minute, something just happened. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
The whole first 15 minutes or so are amazing. You're loving it. And now we're back in the world. This is post Lee dying and post them figuring out the sound is the key. And she goes back in the room. We see the dead monster. And we're wondering what Evelyn is looking for in the water. Oh yeah, it's the tank. Okay, cool. Got it. Okay. That makes sense. But then she cuts the cord. And when she cut the cord, I thought, okay, what is she doing with this? She's going to do something else, but she didn't do anything else. She just grabbed the microphone.
Yeah.
And I thought, wait, is this movie taking a turn? Because I don't understand that. That didn't make any sense to me. Anyway, I would love it if someone could leave in the comments why that could work. You could explain why maybe, that whole scenario that she used works. That would be wonderful because it didn't make much sense to me. And I think that was the turning point for me in the film.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's about all I got.
All right.
Yeah. What are you going to recommend this week?
So this week, I'm going to stay on the John Krasinski train because I think that he is a very gifted actor, and he is a very gifted director and writer. Obviously, he wrote the first one, and I just I want him to win. Like he's just this guy that you just love. You can't help but love the guy. And I did enjoy the movie. Wasn't super crazy about it, but I'm going to stay on the John Krasinski train and go with the pilot for The Office, the TV series. Just because I loved that series so much, and I loved his character so much, and it was his first real breakout. And to see what he's evolved into is pretty badass. To come from nothing to watch him basically grow up on screen, at least professionally, has been really awesome. And to see someone also go from comedy to drama in his Jack Ryan stuff to horror is pretty awesome. To be able to see that and to be successful in all the different genres that he's done is pretty awesome. Not many actors can pull that off. I mean, I'm not gonna watch Tom Cruise in a comedy anytime soon, but I'll watch all the Mission Impossibles you can throw at me. I'll watch all the Top Guns you can throw at me. But for him to be able to do all that, awesome.
I'll rebut. Have you seen Tropic Thunder?
Yes.
Tom Cruise is absolutely hilarious in Tropic Thunder. Now,
yeah.
Now he doesn't normally do a lot of comedies, to your point, but I would watch like that kind of Tom Cruise in a comedy any day of the week. It couldn't be Tom Cruise. It would have to be caricature Tom Cruise.
Okay.
He is
all right.
pee your pants funny in that, I think.
I need to go watch it again. It's been a whole minute.
Same. Yeah, I haven't watched it in a while either.
I mean, what do you mean, you people? What do you mean, you people?
And just for clarity, and I know what you meant, but yeah, John Krasinski co-wrote the first one alongside the other guys, but I think he made a massive impact on the writing of that first one. But yeah, whatever. So I'm going to recommend another horror film that I don't think I've recommended yet. And it's called The Signal. Now there's two The Signals out there. There's one that was made by William Eubank. That's not the one I'm talking about, the one with Lawrence Fishburne. It's not the one I'm talking about. I'm talking about another one. It's older than that. I want to say it's from around like 2008, 2010, somewhere in there. and it's called The Signal. It's a horror film, and it's about a signal that gets broadcast across the world that turns people into killing machines. And if you hear the signal at all, you are done. You're going to start killing everyone around you. And it's absolutely compelling and horrific. And yeah, I think it's good. If you want something horror then go check out The Signal. And yeah, so don't turn away too soon. Stay tuned next week. We're going to do, finally, Alex requested in her review that we do Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life. That's a doozy. So I'm curious to see it. I haven't seen it since it hit the theaters. And so this will be the first time in like a decade that I've sat down to watch it. And so we're going to tackle The Tree of Life next week. And if you're enjoying this episode and our show in general, if you're liking what we're doing here, we'd really appreciate it if you went and subscribed and dropped us a review on iTunes. A little 5-star note saying, hey, this is what we like, and this is the kind of films I would like you to do. And so you can do that at on our iTunes or wherever. And if you want to leave a note on this episode to tell us why this was much better than the first one, or other things they may have done that could have made this even better than it was, then you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/A Quiet Place Part II. It's because it's part 2, but it's II.
I get it.
Yeah.
Nice. Nicely done.
Thanks.
Our quote of the day is from Helen Keller. The best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. That's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, she obviously endured a lot in her life, and being blind and deaf, and still making a massive impact on the world. But coming from her, I think that just kind of encapsulates everything I feel about this movie, because they focused so much on what we were seeing and hearing, and instead of what we were feeling emotionally. And yeah, I don't know, maybe it's a little on the nose, but yeah, that's how I feel.
No, that's great. I love it. We'll just leave it at that. I think it's awesome.
Nice.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We finally got here. We finally did it. It's been months. So excited. But as Wes said, next week we're doing Tree of Life, so please stay tuned for that. Go watch that and be ready. And please review us. And 5-star reviews are awesome, but whatever you think. And share us with your friends and all that good stuff. Every bit helps. We really appreciate that. Until next time, I am Todd.
I am Wes.
Go watch some movies.